Yeah, so that's the 20-year ice loss graph, and as you can see here from the first line, those losses are going slightly down over the last batch of data from PIOMAS. So with November into the database, we can see that the daily losses for the 20-year average go down from 0.9 to 0.8. But it's still the, let's say, most severe projection for any of the long-term multi-year averages, because it goes down to a half-year ice-free in 2036, as you see over here. And you have similar losses for the other long-term averages. I think, yeah, the 6-year is slightly up at the end of the month, but has gone down from 4, 5, 6 to 3. And we also have Greenland and Antarctica with the September data only. Still waiting for October, but as I suggested last time, it seems that for the time being, that the Antarctic Ice Sheet is losing more volume, more and faster, because this prioritized view shows the highest losses for the different multi-year averages, and the 1 and 2 year averages for Antarctica are at 0.8 and 0.7, while for the Greenland Ice Sheet, only the 6-year, 10-year, and 15-year averages are at 0.7, so that means that the 1 and 2 year will be lower than 0.7. So it seems to prevail that for the time being, the multi-year averages for Antarctica for the past couple of years are higher, meaning we lose more land ice from Antarctica than from Greenland. And we can also make a statement about the Arctic sea ice in that context, because you don't see 1 and 2 year on this list, so that means they are lower than these ones shown here. So that means Antarctica is ahead of Greenland and Arctic sea ice, as it looks right now. And I think we do have to keep in mind that we are in a La Nina year, so we are observing more ice and slower ice collapses all over the globe in general, of course with the local differences. Maybe Antarctica is one of those exceptions. So it will be interesting to see when we come out of the La Nina in the middle of the spring and move over to ENSO neutral, maybe over to an El Nino before too long, how all of these loss rates will change, and perhaps dramatically as well. But for the time being, 2036 is the earliest year that we have suggestions for when we lose half the sea ice in the Arctic, or lose all the sea ice for half the year in the Arctic, and the first blue ocean event or a full loss of sea ice for a day or a week will likely come many years before that, so before 2036. So maybe even this decade, in the 2020s, we will see a full blue ocean event in the Arctic Ocean. Okay.
Why does this all matter?
What? Well, because because it isn't true.
Right, but beyond that, what happens if they win? What happens if everyone ignores your measurements, your graphs?
Well, I suppose we'll just carry on, emitting more greenhouse gases. And global temperatures will continue to increase.
And if we do that, what actually happens?
Well, the projection hasn't changed. It's still the same.
The same as what?
As when US scientists first studied it in the 70s.
Go on.
Well, a doubling of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere will result in a 1.5 to 4.5 degree increase.
In what?
Average surface temperature. And polar amplification will mean that melting of the poles will be greater. Maybe as much as 10 degrees.
But what happens, Phil? For our children and their children? No numbers, just the consequences.
Well, by 2100, dust bowl conditions across North America and Africa, Asia too. Sooner than that, a massive reduction in agricultural production, access to drinking water, migration in huge numbers, and bushfires on a massive scale in Australia, the west coast. And we'll melting at the poles, the West Antarctic Ice Sheet. Well, because of that, the global sea level rise of, well, meters.
But what does that all mean for us? People. Make me see it, Phil.
Well, in this worst case scenario, 70% of the habitable world will no longer be able to sustain human life. Millions of species will become extinct. And coastal and delta cities will be underwater. And, well, if the methane in the permafrost and on the seabed is released, well...
Yes?
The climate will collapse. And the world, as we know it, will be gone.
So the clever thing here is how a well-managed attack on the UN COP process, just before the Copenhagen COP15 event, can later be used by the BBC and the mainstream to say COP good, hackers bad, which is partly true, but similar to events of election fraud, it often leads to an untrue belief in democracy being still intact and unmolested. Today we know that the UN COP climate conferences are a fraud, and they're always a fraud. It's about kicking the can down the road to 2050. A bit like saying to Hitler in the 1930s that he can keep his death camps, but by about 1990 they need to be gently phased out. To which the Führer would say, yeah, but do they really need to be phased out now? How about Deutschland just tries to phase down the use of death camps by 1990?